Welcome to another edition of Cal's Corner Radio here on Cal's Corner Radio Show. My name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host, and the executive producer of this show is Rob McConnell here on the X Zone Broadcast Network. Folks, I'd like to talk about a couple of different things tonight. It's a bit all over the map because, as you know, we cover everything from politics to the paranormal. Let's start with the so-called paranormal for once. In a few weeks in June, specifically around the dates of June 24th through June 27th of this year, there will be yet another anniversary of the famous Kenneth Arnold UFO sighting of 1947, which is credited for sparking the so-called modern era of public interest, at least in so-called UFOs, unidentified flying objects, or what some people call flying saucers. Now, although it is not possible to go back in time and definitively say one way or another, we have to be honest about this, exactly what it was that Kenneth Arnold allegedly saw, and it's up for debate, let's be blunt about it, there is no denying that regardless of whatever it was he saw and reported, assuming he was telling the truth as the best as he could remember it or describe it, there is no denying that what he reported and how the media handled describing what he said he saw changed the world. We have to remember that the term flying saucer or flying disc became popular after the media described what Kenneth Arnold had seen, even though his description wasn't quite that simple. We have to remember that there were thousands of UFO reports, both preceding and following Arnold's sighting all around the United States, and what we call a UFO wave, that is a sudden burst of activity, or at least reports of alleged UFO activity. And UFOs were being reported by all the major media all over the world, especially in the United States, and they were being reported across the country. So we have to look at this as in one of two possible ways. Either Arnold really saw something, maybe he saw somebody visiting from another planet, flying to Earth in their spacecraft. He reported that. Others saw the same thing. One would assume that if you're going to fly this distance, assuming they fly a vast distance, again, these are all assumptions. We can't be absolutely certain. We know the distances of space are very vast, independent of how fast we can or cannot go. And we know that there's physics that have to be accounted for, and there's distances to be covered, and that you have to attain certain speeds in order to travel within a reasonable length of time, at least by our standards, from point A to point B. So if these were interplanetary spacecraft, where did they come from? How long ago did they leave? How long did it take them to get to Earth? Did they reach the Earth? Were there 6 or 7 of them seen by Arnold? Were they then seen by thousands of other people, or maybe millions across the United States over the next several weeks? We don't know. But what's interesting about the Arnold case is that regardless of what is the ultimate explanation, and surely there's at least one for what he saw, if not only one, if he saw aliens visiting the Earth, we need to know that. If he didn't see them, then we also need to know that. In a way, that ramification is even more profound than if aliens had been visiting. And I'm not trying to downplay that possibility. I'm not trying to undersell it either. That would be a real game changer. But imagine for a moment if what Arnold saw was not from another planet. What if he saw some meteors? What if he mistook them for being flying discs or some exotic aircraft? He was wrong, in other words, like most people who see UFOs even still today. How do you explain then all the other sightings that occurred over the next several weeks? Was it all just mass hysteria? If it was mass hysteria, what does that say about the human race? Did Arnold's event or the coverage of it or the mass awareness of it through the media's publicity of his encounter and what he reported, did it cause some mass delusion or hallucination? Again, we don't know. But regardless of what the answer is, we can only learn from it. We need to know it and apply whatever lessons there are that can be learned going forward. Now, over the next few weeks, I'm going to try to have on the show a very famous UFO researcher who is one of the handful of experts still alive today on the Kenneth Arnold UFO sighting. He has agreed to appear on the show. I'll set it up. I'll announce a date once we have his commitment. And I will ask some very blunt hard questions about the case to this individual. He is a UFO researcher whose work I do respect and admire. We've been friends for decades, and I'm proud to know him as a fellow human being as well as someone who's interested in this subject. So what we'll do is possibly a two-parter episode coming up in June around the anniversary of Kenneth Arnold's sighting. We'll have him on here, and we'll ask the tough questions. In fact, I'll also ask him some questions that you'll be submitting. I'll start asking you guys to do that sometime over the next few weeks. So that's the plan going forward. So people have asked me over the years why it is that I have bothered to study UFO reports. Why should anybody care? I've heard that many, many times. And I think the answer is very simple. Either there's something to the subject or there's not. Either people are seeing something legitimately or they're not. It's kind of binary. So let's assume that they're not, that everyone's delusional, that there's nothing going on, that people are imagining things, making things up, whatever. Anything but aliens coming to Earth. Let's assume for a moment that that is what's happening. If it is, we need to know that about our species because we have nuclear weapons and other dangerous things, and that makes us delusional by nature, and we should know that. On the other hand, if something is going on, we are being visited, we need to know that too. So regardless of what the answer ultimately is, if it's one or the other of these two binary type scenarios, we win, we learn, things change, we grow, hopefully for the better from it. So that's why I'm interested in it, because no matter what the outcome is, it can only be positive. Where it gets dangerous, as in negative, is when we deny the truth or reality of whatever that outcome is. And it's sad to say and see that, especially in today's society, happen not only in the case of UFOs and the so-called paranormal, but it is even worse to see it spill over into more mainstream subjects. It's always been interesting to me, for example, growing up over the years, starting out as a very young age in the UFO field. I remember before I wrote my first expose on the Billy Meyer UFO case, I could do no wrong. I was a so-called poster child of ufology, very young. I knew all the major UFO experts back then. We corresponded, were in touch, knew each other. I was the youngest of the group. Okay, so I would be in touch with Stanton Friedman and others. We'd exchange ideas, share information about cases. I still have a lot of those letters. They literally number in the thousands of pages over the years, just doing UFO research stuff. But I noticed that when I started to expose hoaxes, okay, and even if a researcher agreed with me, like the Meyer case, that it was a hoax, all of a sudden people would start saying, oh, he's a debunker, he's a skeptic, his mind is closed, CIA disinformation agent. I heard it all, and it was pungent nonsense. And I had not sought out to expose these cases as hoaxes. It ended up happening that way due to the fact that it seemed to be the logical thing to do. If you discover the truth about a case, you're obligated to report it, even if it turns out to be a hoax, a misidentification, something that cannot be legitimately explained. Whatever the truth is, you have to get it out there. And in the case of the Meyer incident, I ended up with enough material to write a small book on it, and with the encouragement of Bill Moore, as I've talked about before. He was the original investigator for the Roswell UFO incident. He's also a longtime friend of mine, a friend of Stanton Friedman's. He told me that he would publish the Meyer expose book if I agreed to put it in that format. I did. He did publish it. It sold out, and the rest is history, as they say. So it wasn't something that I set out to do. But what I noticed is that once you expose certain UFO cases, especially ones that people are emotionally attached to, this would include the popular cases like the Meyer case, the Betty Barney Hill UFO case, the Roswell so-called UFO crash of 1947, the Cash Landrum case, the McMinnville, Oregon case, the Trinidad Island UFO photo case of the late 1950s. These are, again, classic examples. The Rex Heflin UFO photo case of 1967, or 1965, excuse me. These are classic cases that people have a lot of vested time and interest in. They've spent a lot of their own resources, even their reputations, attaching them to the outcome of what they claim is the truth about the cases. And they resist new ideas, or they resist ideas that go against or disprove their pet theories, even though they should embrace them if that's what the facts indicate. But that has not happened. And so what has always fascinated me as a observer of human behavior and as a journalist is this incredible defense or rationalization mechanism that kicks in to people's minds and psyche where it concerns the paranormal. When they start to see that their so-called psychic or astrologer or UFO case is not turning out to be like they hoped or wished they had, all of a sudden these rationalizations kick in. Well, maybe the witness was mistaken, or maybe somebody pressured him to hoax, maybe he was set up, maybe the men in black did it. Anything but the truth. And it's sad to see this, and now you start seeing it in mainstream society, probably epitomized by the recent 2016 U.S. presidential election, which saw Donald Trump capture the White House over Queen Hillary Clinton. Talk about an event that polarized an already polarized country, the United States. That event for sure has further increasingly polarized not only American society, but much of global society. I've heard it in many countries around the world. People have strong opinions about Hillary. I understand that. They also especially have them about Donald Trump, and I understand that as well. So we've gone from the paranormal to mainstream politics now. This incredible ability of human beings to rationalize things, to reject things they don't want to hear, to start projecting what they want to believe into something, and that, of course, distorts the truth. We'll be back after this commercial break with Kal's Corner Radio Show.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
You have heard of the X-Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV. Plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X-Zone, Sci-Fi, and Horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world. Interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
We live in rapidly shifting times of extreme volatility and uncertainty. Such profound change brings a unique opportunity for the evolution of consciousness. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, host of Mission Evolution Radio Show, a program that explores the latest scientific developments and deepening spiritual truths supporting human evolution. Join me on xzbn.net, where I interview leading experts in science, physics, medicine, spirituality, and more. By applying divergent viewpoints to leading-edge topics, we uncover expansive and evolutionary truth to assist you on your path to enlightenment. More information and past episodes are available at missionevolution.org.
Welcome back to segment 2 here on Cal's Corner Radio Show. My name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host, and the executive producer of the show here on the X Zone Broadcast Network is Rob McConnell. So once again, folks, I was talking about why it's important that we find out what's going on. Either we were being visited by several different craft from another world. They obviously didn't come from Earth. Or it was something else, and Kenneth Arnold was mistaken. Either way, it's important to learn from that event, whatever the truth is, and whatever the truth ends up being, we must be prepared to embrace that. And again, I was commenting on how in the UFO field and in the paranormal in general, it's interesting to see this mechanism kick in the minds of some people when they reject the truth. I saw this a lot in India, for example. India is the world's largest superstitious democratic country on the planet. Let's be honest about it. It's part of its iconic charm, let's just put it that way. So here you have a culture that's very old, thousands of years old, and they're trying to keep a lot of their ancient traditions, which exist only for the sake of traditions, even they admit that, and yet they're trying to be modern, and there's often a clash between the old ways and the modern ways. Both of them can't coexist logically, and that is part of India's paradox. So I'll give you an example of a true story over there. Over there, they have a big problem with snakes, of course. There's a lot of poisonous snakes. Probably almost a third of the snakes in India are poisonous, very deadly. So there are people called snake charmers. They actually exist. They'll come into your house and they'll grab the snakes and take them out for a fee. So a friend of mine, very nice man, they saw a snake in his house, and of course he has a bunch of little boys. So what they did is they called a snake charmer. Snake charmer comes down to the house, tells him, okay, I'll go in there and get all the snakes out. Usually there's more than one. So I think about 8, maybe 12 snakes later, the snake charmer showed him all the snakes. The guy paid a few hundred rupees per snake. Snake charmer leaves. Everybody's satisfied, right? Well, apparently, the way it was explained to me, this snake charmer wasn't exactly on the up and up. Apparently, hidden in his robes were more snakes. He would go ahead and put them in the house and then say he'd found them, that it was part of a nest and so on, and it was a way to jack up the bill. And so you have this type of stuff that goes on in India all the time. You even have in India key major events from weddings. I know this because I've been to some of them, to even opening businesses based on what your astrologer says, believe it or not. And of course, there's different types of astrology throughout India. It's not the same as in the West. In fact, there's probably at least one different kind of astrology per every city on the planet. It's bizarre how all these guys can swear this is scientific stuff, and they do, but Indian astrology is very different from, let's just call Western astrology, for lack of a better term. They all do things in their different ways, and they all share one thing in common. It's all a bunch of hooey. And you have to look at the logic behind that. Let's look at the stars, okay? Astrology is very old, thousands of years old. And let's say that you were born thousands of years ago, okay? Whatever stars you were born under today, so to speak, are not the same as you would have been born thousands of years ago, because again, these stars rotate, the universe itself is in constant motion, the galaxy rotates. So whatever sign you may have been born under the year 2000 or versus the year 0, it would vary over time, over the centuries. So let's say you're in Aries today. What sign would you have been 2,000 years ago? Well, you'd have to check your ephemeris to find that out. So what you would be is very different. You'd be a different sign. And yet if you read your description of yourself, a lot of people will often say, oh, that sounds just like me. There's this rationalization game that goes on inside your mind. Now, there's a very interesting classic experiment that one can use to easily test how accurate astrology is. And it's a classic, and I'll tell you how to do it in just a moment. But this has been repeated countless times by magicians such as Penn and Teller and other people who expose the falsehoods of the paranormal. All you have to do is basically take a single horoscope, clip it out from the newspaper, okay? Pick any sign at random, clip it out, and duplicate that, say, 30 times. The same horoscope reading for the same sign, same month, same symbol, same day, etc. The reason you want to do it for, say, 30 times is you want to use a classroom for this experiment. What you do is you tell the class, all the students, that each one of them is going to have their own personal horoscope read, okay? And in truth, that's not going to happen. Instead, what you're going to give each student is the same horoscope. And when you give each student their horoscope and you have them read it without sharing the horoscope with anyone around them, most of those students, if not about half of them, will agree that this totally random horoscope, which was again chosen at random, will sound pretty close, pretty accurate. They'll say it describes them, it fits them to a T, even though this was totally chosen to be random, and it is the same horoscope for everybody. So again, try that simple experiment. It works, done it many times. It is a classic in exposing the paranormal. So I remember one time when I was in India, I went with a friend of mine to see an astrologer. And what happened is, as I was waiting my turn in line, I got to see the shimiga sit there and tell people whatever came to his mind, and people would pay him money, and people would believe it blindly. He could have told them to go jump off a building and they would have done it. It was ridiculous. So I told my friend, this guy's a fraud. He isn't even listening to them. You can see he's making it up. Let's test him. Okay, so we did. What I did is, when it was my turn, I asked him about my dead dog that had passed away and how I was going to handle that and survive the grieving period, etc. He gave me all kinds of advice, explained the meaning of life and death to me, and he had no idea that I didn't have a dog that had died, that I just made it up. I also made up a few other things too, which I won't go into. But the point is, this guy was totally clueless, took the money and wished me good luck and wanted me to come back for a follow-up to make sure I was doing the right stuff. He had absolutely no idea that he had just been fooled, because this guy was a fraud. He had no psychic powers. And that's why I often tell people that my psychic powers fail me, because they do. They always do, because I don't have any. And I try to tell people they don't have any either, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It's okay to admit our limits, and don't try to fool me by saying you do. Don't try to whip out a fancy deck of cards. Don't put a headscarf on. Don't get out crystals and all this meditation stuff, because it's just a bunch of window dressing. It doesn't work. And at the end of the day, it's been my direct observation over the years as a journalist and investigator and somebody who has studied the so-called paranormal and its so-called evidence, that under scientifically controlled conditions, and that's the key, none of this stuff seems to be duplicatable or replicatable. And that's unfortunate. And it's reached the point where I think you have to ask yourself a valid question. Look at the Bible, for example, okay? One of the reasons I have a problem with some of its contents is it literally can't, every word be true. It can't be. We know that it contains translational errors. It contains mistakes that have been made, content that has been added over the years that doesn't appear in earlier versions of the same scriptures that are much older, separated by centuries or even thousands of years. We have seen some meddling that has gone on, and nobody knows its true lineage, meaning nobody can say with certainty that it's only these books and not any others. Instead, you have a group of people who got together, they cast votes saying, we think this is it. People have accepted that. That doesn't prove it's 100% true. And you have this problem with major religious texts. You have it with old texts that are supposed to tell you how things are supposed to be, and you have texts that are thousands of years old. They do contain errors, they do contain mistakes, and it's interesting to see how in today's modern world that people are always trying to retrofit them. Look at what's going on with the Catholic Church right now. In an attempt to be more universally appealing, it is reaching out to groups that it has in the past traditionally shunned or just dismissed as sinners or whatever. Homosexualities. There was a pronouncement by the Pope recently that, it's okay. God made you this way, quote unquote. No Pope would have spoken that way prior to this current one, but yet the Catholic Church is trying to be all-inclusive, to reach out to people that it otherwise would ostracize and has isolated and condemned, let's be honest, from society. So when you look at the Bible and you look at the claims of the miracles that have occurred in it, there's all kinds of miracles going on almost on a page-by-page basis, nonstop for hundreds or thousands of years. And then all of a sudden they pretty much stop. They just dry out. And you have to ask yourself, well, what happened? Who turned off the faucet? Have there been none since then? Aren't there people walking around who can still heal and do whatever? That doesn't seem to be going on anymore. All those old guys died out, and with them, all those miracles. Well, that's rather curious, and to be honest, a bit suspicious, at least from an investigative standpoint. And you have to take it and say, well, either one happened or the other. Maybe it was a mixture of both. But how do we kind of test it? The one thing that's always bothered me about reading all of these amazing accounts over the years is why wasn't there an explosion of all these individually written or passed down accounts of all these people who were supposedly affected by this? Take the famous character of Lazarus. Jesus rose him from the dead. So when Lazarus went to dinner that night, first night from being resurrected, what did he talk about? Probably what it was like to be dead, I assume. Wouldn't someone have been curious about that? Hey, how was it? What does it feel like? Whatever. These are just normal human things, and yet there seems to be a dearth of that kind of human account of what would have been asked or written about or talked about back then if the incident had really happened. And we know this because we've seen it throughout archaeology. We have seen jokes and snide comments about the pharaohs who were oppressing some of the people who were building the pyramids for them. The people who had to do the hard labor didn't appreciate that, so they wrote snide things about their masters. Those have survived over time. It's a human thing to do. And yet we don't see the equivalent in the Bible and things like that. And it's rather interesting that, that tends to be the case. I wonder, as an investigator, where is all this stuff? How come it's missing?
From our broadcast studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, to the world and beyond, you're watching the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net.
AVS Media Den.
You have heard of the X-Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X-Zone, Sci-Fi, and Horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world. Interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365. Rob McConnell here, presenting an overview for Nicholas Paul Jennings, author of a fascinating book, Amen. It presents facts revealed by Egyptologists, facts that enable us to understand why Amen is the beginning of creation of God. It provides recommendations for religious leaders of the major religions to unify their beliefs and teach the Word of God. Love one another. Amen informs people how mankind conceived God. It was the Egyptians that developed the concepts of a soul, a hereafter, and Son of God. And finally, after the worship of many gods, They conceived the belief in one universal God, the maker of all there is. For more information, visit www.futureofgodamen.com. That's www.futureofgodamen.com.
Welcome back to segment 3 here on Cal's Corner Radio Show. My name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host. The executive producer of the show here on X-Zone Broadcast Network is Rob McConnell. Now, as we have wandered about here across different subjects, let me explain how it's kind of all ultimately related, because tends to be a method to my madness. I'm not just bringing this stuff up at random. We started off with the idea of what happened in 1947, that there's another anniversary coming up that marks the event when Kenneth Arnold reported those discs that he saw over Mount Rainier, which were reported as flying saucers. The event either triggered or was part of a phenomenon that then engulfed the United States over the next several weeks, when there were thousands and thousands of UFO sightings across the United States and reported around other parts of the earth as well. So again, we have to ask ourselves, did Arnold report something accurately? Was he seeing spaceships from another world visiting Earth? Or was he mistaken and he reported something that he thought was another issue entirely, but he was wrong, and his event triggered a mass hysteria of some kind? We'll never know, unfortunately. What we can do is try to find out as much as we can about reports of that era and take it from there. But regardless of what can only be one of two explanations, either they were aliens or they were not, the ramifications are profound, because if they were not, and this was just a mistake he made, it triggered a hysteria, okay? Or you have to believe that it wasn't aliens, and then aliens happened to come just after that, and that's just one heck of a coincidence. That's probably even more unlikely to believe than if it were aliens from day one. I don't know. We can only speculate. Or if it was aliens, we need to know that too. So either way, regardless of what the truth is about the Arnold sighting, it is important regardless. Now you talk about books and the paranormal. You talk about religion. You talk about books like the Bible, which are full of these so-called miracles. They tell people how to think, how to behave, what to believe, how to act, what to do in society, what not to do. They're important social construct. They have influenced our society. People have shed their blood over it. They are important throughout history. They have helped shape the human race, etc. Again, the question becomes, what do you do with it? You have, in today's world, you have very old parts of the earth, very old cultures. This includes cultures dating back in the Middle East to cultures in Asia, like India, which are thousands of years old, which are trying to go ahead and get along, not only in peace with their fellow countrymen and neighbors, but they're trying to come into the modern era as technology has given us new capabilities, which have also forced us, in a way, to face some issues which maybe a lot of people don't want to. Let's look at the issue of smartphones. Look at the issue of UFOs again. What do they have to do with each other? Well, if you believe what was going on in the UFO field prior to the invention of the iPhone, what you had was a bunch of videos and a huge spike in the number of videos. These are movies that have been shot on video format by people around the world that supposedly show unidentified flying objects. A lot of these videos came from Mexico. They were featured on TV networks like Fox, ABC, CBS, NBC, etc. They received a lot of global attention. They also made a lot of hucksters and people who are frauds in the UFO field a lot of money fooling people as well. So here you had a spike in the amount of so-called visual evidence. People were filming videos of so-called UFOs at record numbers. Then the iPhone is invented by Apple a little over 10 years ago. The whole smartphone industry gets reinvented. The phone gets reinvented. And now everyone suddenly has a camera, whether they wanted it or not. It's built into the device. And what you have now is you have billions of cameras in the form of billions of smartphones, whether they're running Apple's iOS device or they're running Android. But the point is, you have billions of people out there, billions of people online, and they all have billions of cameras. So now what happened to the UFO evidence? Are there billions of more UFO images? No, there's not. In fact, just the opposite has now happened. With everyone and their brother having a camera, or more than one, all of a sudden the number of UFO photos proportionally and videos has dropped sharply, incredibly. In fact, it dropped faster than it ever spiked before this period. So what does that tell you? It tells you one of two things. Either there was nothing to it and it was all a bunch of hyperbole, or the aliens suddenly got camera shy and said, that's it, we're packing it up, we're going home. There's too many cameras on this planet. There's really only two ways to look at it. I would argue that is probably the first scenario, which is that it was always overhyped. Because if all this stuff is going on out there, there's a bunch of Captain Kirks flying around in their spaceships, and everyone's got billions of cameras now to document all this stuff, the number of images should have gone up through the roof proportionately in relation to suddenly billions of more cameras being used, but yet it didn't. Just the opposite occurred, and that is really proof that it was always hyperbole. And we have to face that. And the same can be true, or should be said, with imagery of the so-called paranormal. Where's this explosion of ghost images now that there's billions of more cameras? And there's a lot more cameras in use to monitor buildings, things where security is needed, things where you would think ghosts would hang out. There are record numbers of cameras, yet there are not record numbers of ghosts being captured in a proportionate number as there are cameras being used. So what's going on? Are they spooking the paranormal? No, it's probably safe to say that it was a bunch of hyperbole. And what about psychic powers now? There are so many ways to test people scientifically, objectively, that it's really kind of hard to believe that people still get fooled by people who claim to have psychic powers. It's like people who get fooled not only suspend their ability to think critically, it's like they forget they're living in the modern era and that a lot of this can easily be tested. But people don't bother. But what has been happening, which is rather encouraging, and it's long overdue, is if you Google psychic fraud, you will find that there are cases now that are actually being prosecuted by authorities. Police, including district attorneys, are actually filing charges against some so-called psychic frauds, holding them criminally accountable, forcing them to spend time behind, bars in jail, and of course paying restitution to some of their victims. And it's long overdue. I remember very vividly, for example, after the terrorist attacks of 9/11 in September of 2001, I remember there used to be a series called Crossing Over. And an individual would get on that show and he would channel dead people. And I was really offended as a human being seeing this, watching these broadcasts from India. For one, I was embarrassed being an American that Fox would even run this type of programming, but it did. But just the idea that a human being would stand up in front of grieving people, tell them that they can talk to their beloved ones, lie to them like that, take their pain, their money, just totally fleece them. I find that to be real offensive. And of course, behaving that way or fooling people that way or conning them, there are laws against that, and people should be prosecuted when they reach that point. Shame on the TV networks for running that kind of programming and not exposing it for what it is, which was fraud. So I was happy to see later other shows like what Penn and Teller had, where they would expose the paranormal and try to separate fact from fiction, with them even admitting that they couldn't explain everything. But that doesn't prove that it was little gray aliens from Zeta Reticuli. So for me, the bottom line in all this is the same as with many important things in life. It's been my observation that not only most important things in life, they're binary or black and white, but behind everything that we can understand, there's at least one lesson to be learned, and we must apply that lesson. In the case of the Middle East and geopolitical concerns, you have very old cultures steeped in religious beliefs, steeped in superstition, even in more ways than even India is, which is frightening in some areas. And of course, there's a lot of weapons in this volatile area. And you have ideological beliefs where the people have been at war against each other for a long time. And these are religious wars, these are geopolitical wars, these are even territorial wars for resources and control of the region. Look at what's been going on between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Not only is there a religious background to that, there's also, again, geopolitical concerns that have nothing to do with religion. They're just the real politic on the ground. Both want to be the regional powers in that area, along with Israel, which already is, and both don't want to coexist. They feel that it has to be at the expense of the other, meaning the Saudis must be dominant over the Iranians must be dominant over the Saudis. So what's going on behind the scenes is while Israel and Iran have been fighting lately, they have been secretly meeting through third parties such as Russia to come to an agreement so that this conflict doesn't get out of hand. Because at the end of the day, neither side can afford for this conflict to get out of hand because it literally has global consequences. There's not only the price of oil and the oil markets. Stability in the Middle East must be maintained as much as it can be, considering its already volatile nature. You've got everybody from terrorist groups in there to countries that are still struggling with their first taste of democracy, hopefully one day. Then, of course, you've got other large players like China and Russia who have vested interests in that area, along with the United States. And before you know it, it affects, again, everybody, no matter what country you're from, whether it's a superpower nation or even a small island power. The point is, it is all one global interconnected community. And of course, what happens in...
You have heard of the X Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X Zone, sci-fi, and horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world. Interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
The new nonfiction book, Razor of Madness, is similar to cult movies like Clockwork Orange, Dragon's Tattoo, or The Other Side of Hell. Wayne Morin Jr. and Thomas Lee Howe will expose widespread and systematic deficiencies in this thought-provoking tell-all novel. Mind control rages among scholars in law schools. Human rights are ignored while thought reform and mental manipulation are accepted practices used as behavior modification. Dr. Louis Jolyon West comes to mind. Media and public scrutiny shows that United States mental hospitals are in fact destructive murder industries. Razor of Madness expose novel details this epidemic through an in-depth professional and personal investigation. For decades, there has been a revolving door policy that still releases killers and pedophiles back into society. The maestro of mind control continues to haunt America to this very day. Razor of Madness is available in paperback or as a downloadable ebook at Amazon.com.
The concept of a new age has been around since the late 19th century, yet much of its original meaning has been lost. What exactly is the new age? Is it a religion, a collection of obscure esoteric practices, a series of doomsday predictions, or an astrological event? The New Age Chronicles is a unique complementary publication bringing reason and grounded information to separate fact from fiction. chock full of valuable information to support you as we make the monumental shift into the new era. You won't want to miss a single innovative issue. The New Age Chronicles newspaper is coming soon to www.newagechronicles.com.
Welcome to the fourth and final segment here on Cal's Corner Radio Show. My name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host. The executive producer of the show, once again, is Rob McConnell. Now, again, to recap, in 1947, you had a event occur in June where Kenneth Arnold reported unidentified flying objects. They were later described as flying discs, flying saucers. That term, because of press coverage of that event, entered the mainstream American English language. It changed popular culture forever. Suddenly, flying saucers were everywhere. Over the next several weeks, off and on for years, millions of reports came in. Either was a coincidence, the start of something that had happened, or it was a mistake made by Arnold and a hysteria was launched. We don't know. There's nothing wrong with going back and asking those tough questions, admitting we don't know. But regardless of what it was, there's no question that it was important. Either it was real or it was not. Regardless, history was made and changed. Now, all these decades later, we had the Cold War going on. We had incidents like Roswell. We had the Hill case, hoaxes like Billy Meyer. You have this whole field grow up, so to speak, over a course of generations. Ufology became ufology at some point. It became a business where UFO groups were charging money from the public to feature the most amazing stories told by some of the most incredible off-the-wall people you can imagine, people who claim they traveled back in time, claim they were abducted, claim they'd had sex with aliens, claim they'd been to other planets, claim they had pieces of alien metal, were in contact with them on a regular basis, had taken hundreds or thousands of photos of them, even movies. You name it, ufology seemed to have a case that could fit it. Things got way out of control near the end of the millennium as millennial madness historically hit the human race. There was the Heaven's Gate cult suicide that occurred, which was predicted by people who tried to warn the press against this millennial madness and the dangers of lack of critical thinking posed to society. The mainstream media, of course, ignored many of those pleas. Heaven's Gate suicide occurred. At that point, the media tripped all over themselves, warning the people about the dangers of cults. The millennial came and went. The world didn't end. Jesus didn't come back. Cold War was over by then in the late 1990s. And then terrorism occurred about almost 2 years into the new millennium. There was a warning about it on New Year's Eve for the millennium when Seattle was closed down and the Space Needle because of a threat from Al-Qaeda. A terrorist was apprehended from Canada coming into Seattle. So over the next 18 years, you've seen this fit and start cycle that has gone on with the paranormal. 1 minute it's a hot subject, the next minute it's not. 1 minute it's being exposed, the next minute it's not. You've got all this geopolitical stuff going on. You've got religion increasingly becoming an influential factor in people's lives, even when it is breakthrough announcements by the Catholic Church saying that they no longer condemn homosexuality like they did. You have countries like the United Arab Emirates who are liberalizing, even Saudi Arabia is liberalizing to where they're allowing women to drive and not be forced to cover themselves. So you have all of these things going on. And in the middle of this, you've got politics, you've got things like climate change, you've got the uprooting of people due to wars, you've got geopolitical conflicts taking place, and then you've got people trying to survive on a day-to-day basis, and they don't know what tomorrow's going to bring either. You combine all of these elements, and you've got a very volatile mix, a combination of dynamics of which I don't think the human race has ever witnessed before. If you look at what's going on now, there are so many countries that are at the crossroads of their existence for the near-term future that regardless of what decision they're going to make, either turning left or to the right, it's going to change things. Look at Italy right now. A lot of people don't pay attention to Italy, but they should. Populists are very close now to taking over the government of that country. You've got this anti-immigration wave in Germany that is a backlash due solely to how the government has mishandled the mass flux of war refugees into Germany. So again, you've got nationalists in that front. You had a recent election in France, which Macron won. Had Macron lost that election, Marine Le Pen would have been the government. The far-right government would have been in power. Again, she came within one election, one round of winning the French presidency. Why? Because people are upset with their current governments. You have Great Britain leaving the European Union. Most people in London voted to stay, but most people outside London voted to leave the European Union. They didn't like the way that the future of their country was being decided by a handful of bureaucrats in Brussels. Again, you can't blame people for going against a system when they feel that that system has failed them. What the danger is when a system fails its people, is that people become desperate enough to try almost anything except what they feel has failed them. Look at the presidency of American President Donald Trump. He sits in the White House because he ran against Hillary Clinton, holding her up as the epitome of what has failed the American people. That the problem is the main two parties, the Democrats and the Republicans. So running as a political outsider, even though he ran on the Republican ticket, Donald Trump won the election. He flipped the blue states that typically went for the Democrats, that the Democrats had viewed were historically in the bag for them. They didn't have to take them seriously or spend a lot of time campaigning for them because they were going to automatically vote for Hillary. Turns out that wasn't true. They voted instead for Trump. So you have this going on around the world right now. You have also at a time where other countries like China are stepping up their aggression. This also includes countries like Iran in the Middle East, where they're trying to reach for the next level of whatever it is they're trying to achieve. In the case of Communist China, it is control of the southern Chinese Sea. This is why they keep making artificial islands. This is why they've now militarized them. This is why they claim territorial sovereignty over that area of what is literally thousands of square kilometers of ocean. They want to be able to control commerce that goes through that area rather than leaving it free and open for the rest of the world. You have Iran, which is trying to take over parts of Yemen. You have Iran, which is furthering its military interests in Syria. That has led to a conflict recently with Israel, in which literally hundreds of rockets have been fired between Iranian-backed forces, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, Hamas, and Israel, firing back and forth on each other in this military confrontation. This is also going on at the same time while secret negotiations are going on with third parties like Russia to try to stem the fallout from this conflict so that it doesn't escalate out of control. Iran is pushing further into Syria. They're trying to push closer to the border with Israel. Israel has said they will not allow that, and as a consequence, they've been pushing back, and that's where things stand right now. You have a polarization going on at the United Nations level. While Hamas fired around 100 rockets on Israel just hours ago, where was the United Nations condemning it? Nowhere. They refused to condemn a terrorist group firing around 100 rockets on innocent civilians. That's how low and unethical the UN Security Council has gotten. The country of Kuwait instead wanted to pass a resolution calling for the protection of Palestinians. They weren't interested in the subject of the terrorist group Hamas firing rockets on innocent civilians because they were Jews. They didn't care. But if they were Palestinians, they would care. That is how two-faced the UN Security Council has become. I mean, let's be honest, when you have countries like Saudi Arabia and Syria heading up human rights councils or women's rights councils, it's a joke. You might as well not even have those committees to begin with. And yet this is what's going on at the United Nations. And that's why all of this ultimately, folks, is interconnected. Because people do ultimately as they believe. They will try to do what they can. Sometimes they can't always get their way. They might not always be able to act on their first choice. But ultimately, people do as they believe. And that's why it is important to always separate fact from fiction, to call something what it really is versus what it is not, to never mince words. And we must especially do that in today's world because we have unprecedented technology and means to communicate and literally share information with each other that we've never had it so easy before. But with that capability and ability comes responsibility. We can't just sit there and flood the airways with nonsense. We can't sit there and flood it with fake news. We have to call things as they really are, accept that, yes, we will be offended here and there. It's okay to be offended. We have a right to be offended. And we also have a right to share our different views with other people. But we don't have the right to censor others, and we don't have a right to deny what are really ultimately facts. On this show here, we try to do our little contribution to society in that we try to separate fact from fiction. And going forward, we are going to have a lot of different guests covering different subjects, and I look forward to asking the hard questions on those shows. Not to put our guests under any sort of uncomfortable situation, but again, to separate fact from fiction so that people trying to listen to the show and trying to understand what's going on and hearing all these contradictory claims out there, or at least given enough ammunition, so to speak, so that when they're confronted with data that they're interested in, they can at least help separate the signal from the noise, separate the fact from the fiction, and use that going forward as they try to digest what is really information overload today. All right, I'd like to thank you for joining us here on Kal's Corner Radio Show. My name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host. We'll be back again with another exciting show, hopefully next week.
Modern Esoteric, Beyond Our Senses by Brad Olson, consummates the lifeology story about where humanity originates. It is the lost continents, the primitive wisdom, the mythos of creation, and the rethinking of ancient history as we are taught in academia. There is much more to the story than what we have been told. As this is the first book in the Esoteric series, Modern Esoteric starts at the beginning of time and accelerates up to this modern age. Future Esoteric is book 2 in the series and takes a forward-looking position ahead of today with an open and honest examination of the ET issue and various unexplained phenomena. To discover the writings of author Brad Olson, visit www.bradolson.com. That's www.bradolson.com. Are you or is someone you know struggling with addictions, depression, anxiety, relationships, low self-esteem, lack of confidence, grief, success, and prosperity? Do you know that your subconscious belief plays a big role in the outcome of your hard work? We can help you permanently change the beliefs that may be the reason for your struggles and failures. We care about getting you the return on your investment and the results you are looking for. We can help you be free of the limitations of your past and in realizing your highest potential. We work with people by phone and Skype. For more information, visit us at www.ritasoman.com. That's www.ritasoman.com. Do you think you have energy problems in your home? Do you feel better when you're away than when you're home? Joey Korn is a global leader in the world of dowsing who specializes in personal energy clearing and space clearing. He He can help you create an ideal energy environment in your home no matter where you live in the world. Learn about his remote spiritual house cleaning services and much more at www.dowsers.com. You can get Joey's book, Dowsing, A Path to Enlightenment, as well as other dowsing books and tools, Kabbalah books, and Walter Russell books. Joey's work is really amazing. Go to dowsers.com right now. That's DOWSERS.com or call 1-877-DOWSING. That's 1-877-369-7464.